mathematicians, and welcome to another segment on Wisdom Window. In our last lesson, we learned about how to measure for the capacity of an item by using the measurement of liquid in milliliters and liters. And we applied our knowledge on how much a milliliter is versus a liter to determine how many liters or milliliters are within a container. Pretty cool. That was really fun, and I hope you were able to try some different things like that at home too. And so today we're going to further our understanding of measurement by learning something called mass. But before we begin to learn about mass, I want to talk about this object. So this is just a little pencil pillow that I have. And I just want us to make some predictions. So, do you think a pillow is light or heavy? What do you think? Light or heavy? What do you think? Yeah, I would say they're probably pretty light. And now, how could you measure for the mass of an item? Now that's important to know. But before we can measure for mass, we need to learn what mass is. And also we need to learn this new vocabulary to help us talk like mathematicians in this new unit. So here I have my little poster on mass. And mass is how much matter is in an object. And matter is basically just what makes up everything. So this is made up of matter. This is made up out of matter. I'm made out of matter. It's just what creates items. And so matter can also be measured for how heavy an item is, whether it is lighter or heavier. And so for mass, we can use a bunch of different tools and measurements to measure how heavy something is. So I'm sure many of you guys have seen these before, but this is a scale. And this measures for the mass of our weight. So we step on it and it tells us how many pounds we are. And this is an important measurement to know because that is a customary unit of measurement. So that's a type of measurement that we use in the United States. So we weigh ourselves in pounds. But it's also really important to know metric units of weight. So today we're going to be focusing on two of those units. And one of those is grams, and the other is kilograms. And now a gram is about the weight of a paperclip. If you pick up a paperclip and you place it on your hand, you would notice that it's not very heavy at all. It's actually pretty light, like you don't feel anything at all. And I just measured this paperclip and it is exactly a gram. So this is a great comparison when you're trying to weigh the mass of items. And now our other unit of measurement is kilograms. And kilograms is about the weight of a book. And this can be tricky because there are many different types of books. For example, I have this picture book, Miss Nelson Had a Field Day, and I would say it's pretty light. It's definitely not as light as a paperclip, but it's definitely a lighter book. And then you have books like I read at school, and these are huge and they're really heavy. So how do you know that a book would be a reliable source? So it really depends on the type of book. Some books are going to help you measure in kilograms, and others, like these in Miss Nelson's Had a Field Day book, are not going to be good. So I did find a book that was a pretty good size and a little heavy but not too heavy, and it was about 1 kilogram, and that's my Dr. Seuss book. Okay, so now when I measure between a paperclip and a heavier but not too heavy of a book, I can feel the difference between which one is heavier and which one is lighter. Now what do you think is heavier and what do you think is a lighter object? My paperclip or the book? What do you think? Yeah, I would think the paperclip. And it's also really important to know what types of tools that you can use to measure different items. And these include scales, and some of these scales look like this. This one is my mom's, and she kind of collects things like this. So this is like an antique scale. You put something on it, and it pushes down, and it tells you the weight or the mass of the object you're weighing. And similar to this one is another scale. And this one measures in grams as well. This is like a food scale. So you put the food inside your bucket here, you place it on here, and then it measures in ounces or in grams of the food. Kind of cool. And there are many other options that you can use to measure for grams and kilograms, but those are some of the ones I use more often. And so now there's also a triple beam balance. And this is a balance that measures specifically for grams. And if you look on the left-hand side, you will see this circular disc. And what this is it's a place for you to place an item that you would like to measure. And what that does is it pushes down based on how heavy it is, and it moves a little beam across these, what looks like a ruler. And what these rulers are is that they measure the amount of grams that an object is. And this is another type of balance beam. And so what this does is it takes measurements of two different objects to determine if they are the same mass or the same weight. And then also a hanging scale. And so those are ones that you pick up and you can hang from the ceiling. And what they do is that they use gravity to measure an object's weight or mass. Pretty cool, right? Those are often seen in the grocery store, like when you measure for bananas. That's pretty cool, right? And this is a picture of it here. Now, it's also important to recognize the difference between grams and kilograms. And so something important to note is that 1 kilogram, or something like a book, is equal to the same weight as 1,000 paper clips, or 1,000 grams. That's a huge difference. So imagine the weight of 1 paper clip versus 1,000. It's going to be a lot heavier to have a kilogram than it would be to have a gram. Does that make sense? Okay. So today we're going to be getting some practice in determining the weight or the mass of an object by using grams and kilograms. We're going to look at a couple different items and determine whether that item is measured one way or another based on our knowledge of what we learned here. Alright, so let's go to my desk and let's work on some practice problems. Let's go. Alright, so I have pulled out my practice 15-3 and we're going to be learning more about units of mass. Now, before we get started with a couple practice problems, I just want to let you know why it is so important to learn about metric units. Although we use customary units in the United States, it's important to understand how to measure using metric units, just in case we were to maybe travel abroad. Maybe you want to go to Europe one day, or maybe Africa or Asia. Many different places around the world use the metric units. So it's really important to understand and learn about both the customary and metric, because you never know when you're going to be able to use them. And, well, it's pretty cool just to know all the different types, just in case. So here I'm going to have us look at numbers 1, 4, and 8. Okay? And then I'm going to explain how you are going to take your next steps forward in solving these problems. And then we're going to be going over these questions right here, 9 through 13 together, just to kind of have a review on some of the different tools that you can use for measurement. So I'm going to start by reading my directions for the first set of problems. And my directions are, choose the better estimate for each. Okay, so since we're going to estimate something, we're going to determine which of these weights is more likely to be that item. So if we look at a dictionary, I'm sure you guys have seen a dictionary, they're pretty big and they contain a lot of definitions on words. So now we have to think. It says, is it 3 grams or 3 kilograms? And now remember from our introduction earlier that this paperclip is equal to 1 gram. And that's important because it's telling us that this dictionary is either 3 of these paper clips in weight, or it would be 3,000 of these in weight. So 1 kilogram is the same as 1,000 grams. So if I know that 1 kilogram is equal to 1,000 grams, then if there are 3 kilograms, I would need to add up how many of these? 3. So I would have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. So now we're either looking at the weight of 3 paper clips or 3,000. Now what do you think? Do you think a dictionary is the same weight as 3 paper clips or 3,000? Yeah, so I think it would be 3 kilograms. Because like my Dr. Seuss book, it was quite a bit heavier than the paper clip, right? And we know that it's not anywhere close to the measurement of a paper clip. So we're going to say that this is going to be measured in kilograms because it's a heavier object. And now let's look at number 4. And this is a picture of a cookie. And now it's telling us to estimate whether we think that this cookie weighs 30 grams or 300 grams. So here we're only looking at grams, and we're not needing to look at kilograms. So we're looking at something in comparison to paper clips. So remember, a paper clip is the same as 1 gram. So is a cookie more likely to be 30 paper clips in weight? Or would it be closer to 300 grams in weight? What do you think? Imagine having both of the amounts of paper clips in your hands. If you had 30 of these in this hand and 300 of them in this hand, which one do you think would be closer to what a cookie feels like in the palm in your hand? Just imagine. Now, what do you think? And why? Okay, so I kind of agree with that too. So I would say that a cookie would be about 30 grams or 30 paper clips. 300 paper clips is going to weigh quite a bit, right? So I would say a cookie is pretty light, it's airy, it's soft, it's chewy, it's good, but it's not going to be super, super heavy. So yeah, I would say it would be about 30 grams. Now let's look at number 8. And number 8 says we're measuring an adult male. So we're measuring like your dad or your grandpa. We're measuring their mass or their weight. And so now, what do you think would be a better estimate for an adult? So we're measuring in kilograms only, not in grams. So would we think that they weigh, let's compare this to our paperclip again. So remember, if 1 kilogram is equal to a gram, then 7 kilograms would be the same as 7,000 grams. And then 70 kilograms would be the same as what? Let's see. let's see. I'm actually going to do it like this. So if we took away the zeros, we have 7 times 1 is 7, right? And then we just added my 3 zeros to make the kilograms, right? So if I multiplied 70 times 1, what is that? 70. And then we would just add the 3 zeros afterward. So that's the same. That's kind of like how you can use that to compare with a paperclip. Now there's a couple different ways that you can compare. You can just find an object that is worth the weight of a kilogram, or you can keep using something like this to compare. So it's either going to be 7,000 grams or 7,000 paper clips or 70,000 paper clips. Which one do you think would be more comparable to an adult, like your dad or your grandpa? 7,000 of these or 70,000? Yeah, so I would think it would be closer to the 70,000 grams or the 70 kilograms, because when you have 7,000 of these, yeah, that's a lot. But just imagine how much you weigh. You weigh quite a bit more compared to a paperclip, right? Exactly. So that's just how you can kind of work with this workbook page and estimate the difference between kilograms, grams, and grams versus grams, and kilograms versus kilograms. Just kind of find an object that really helps you in measuring and comparing, and just having something to weigh in your hand and to think about having a certain amount will honestly really help you in determining which of the two measurements would most likely be the weight or the mass of that object. And so now, before I go on to our next section of questions, I just want to explain a few of these items so you know what to expect. So number 2 is called an anchor. And an anchor is something that keeps a boat still in the water. So it keeps it from moving. And usually anchors are made out of a really heavy metal. So keep that in mind. And number 3 is a picture of a calculator. And now I know you've guys seen a calculator before. So now just think about the weight of a calculator and compare and contrast. And then you have a crayon. Now you're not looking at a crayon box. You're looking at a single crayon. Okay, so what's the measurement? What's the estimate that's better for measuring a crayon? And what about a large dog? So like a German Shepherd, or maybe a Husky, or a Mastiff. And then a quarter. So you can actually get a quarter out and feel how heavy it is, and then think about it in comparison to paper clips. All right, now let's look at this next section of questions. So my directions are: choose the best tool to measure each. So now this is basically just a review, except for maybe 1 or 2 of these. But let's think. The mass of a phone. Okay, well, we're learning about mass right now, right? So we're measuring how heavy something is. Do you see an object right here that might measure for the weight of something or for the mass of a telephone? Does a ruler measure weight? No, probably not. Does a measuring cup measure for weight? No. What about a clock? Or a thermometer? What about a scale? Yeah, definitely. So a scale can measure the mass of a phone. Now let's look at the next one. The length of a crayon. Now, can you measure for length using a measuring cup? What about an analog clock? A thermometer? What about a ruler? Yeah, that measures for length, right? So a ruler would help us measure for length. Now, what about for temperature? What is that tool called that we use to measure for temperature? Is it an analog clock? Is it a measuring cup? What about a thermometer? Yeah. So sometimes you can see these outside. Sometimes different stores, like if you ever go to a place like Orchard Supply or any other type of like Home Depot, sometimes they have these outside and they have like a red liquid that rises up and falls down depending on the temperature. That's pretty cool, right? So, a thermometer helps us to measure temperature. Can you say thermometer? Very good. All right, now what about the time for dinner? Man, I'm really hungry. What time is dinner? How can I find the tool that measures the time that dinner would be? Would I use a measuring cup to measure for time? No. What about an analog clock? Exactly. Yeah. We learned about that a couple units ago. Do you remember? Do you remember the different types of clocks that you can use to measure for time? There was a bunch. All right, now our last one. Let's see, the capacity of a bowl. Do you remember what the capacity of something is? What does it mean for capacity? Yeah, so it's how much space is within a shape, right? So we're going to measure something based on how much liquid we can put in a container or whatever other items we're trying to measure, right? So could a measuring cup measure for that? Most definitely. And if you remember, you saw me using something like this in our previous lessons. All right, so now those tools are going to be super important to remember because throughout your lives, you're going to be using things like a ruler or a measuring cup, an analog clock, maybe a scale, and a thermometer. Isn't that kind of crazy how all of these things measure different types of items and different things? I can tell you that I probably use these every single day. Yep, I do. Every single day. Temperature, knowing it and knowing how to measure it helps me to know if I should put on a jacket before I leave the house. Or a clock helps me to know what time I need to leave for school. And a scale, well, I can use that to measure my weight, or I can use it to measure maybe the food I'm cooking. And then a measuring cup, well, I used that in the last lesson to measure for Jell-O, right? And then a ruler, well, I can use that all the time. We use that for measuring our height, for measuring how long something is. I mean, we use those things all the time. So knowing what these things are called and how to use them is very important. And now looking at numbers 14 and 15, these are going to have you think a little bit deeper on our topic. So for number 14, it has you determine whether you would use grams or kilograms to find the mass of a letter. Now, remember what a letter is. That's something that you get in the mail. So would that be measured in grams or kilograms? Okay, and then you're going to explain why. And I want you to try and work and use complete sentences. So that's something we've been practicing for a while now. And it will help us to understand what you know, and it will also help you in understanding how to explain your thoughts in complete sentences, which is a really useful tool, and you'll be using it honestly forever. And then for number 15, you're going to find the best estimate for the mass of a pair of sneakers. So for the weight of sneakers. And for this, you can actually grab a shoe. I know you guys have a lot of different types of shoes. So you can use that and hold it in your hand and think about whether it is 1 kilogram, 1 gram, 10 kilograms, or 10 grams. Remember, you can use a paper clip or maybe like a book that's about a kilogram to help you in determining the different masses of objects. So this is going to be a great worksheet, and I think you guys can definitely get a lot of practice through this workbook page. And now, I know I went over a couple extra problems, like number 9 and number 13, Just remember, we are just now learning about mass, and well, we just finished learning only 2 lessons about capacity. So if these were still a little confusing, that's okay. That's something that we're still in progress of learning. So don't be too hard on yourself if it's a little confusing to figure out what types of tools you can use to measure those things. But things like a ruler or a thermometer or an analog clock, I expect you guys to know those things and what you can use those to measure. Because those are things that we've already learned in depth, and I'm hoping that you guys are getting a lot of practice with using those in your own lives beyond the classroom. Alright, so that was a pretty cool lesson. We learned a lot about mass and how to measure the weight of items using grams and kilograms. So that was pretty cool. And then now, since we've had some practice, what would you measure my pillow out of? Would you measure it in grams or kilograms? Yeah, I would measure it using grams because it is pretty light. And now I have an exit ticket for you. So, let's say I want to measure my Minnie Mouse ears. So would you estimate that the weight of these ears is either 50 grams or 500 grams? Do you think that these Minnie Mouse ears would be the same as 50 paper clips or 500 paper clips? Now think about how much that would weigh and then how much these weigh. I'll let you have a moment to think. Do you think that my Minnie Mouse ears would be measured in 50 grams or 500 grams? I'll let you think for a moment. And while you're thinking, I'm going to go over last week's answer for our trivia. Our question from last week was, won't is a contraction of what 2 words? Do you remember? Won't is a contraction for the 2 words will not. So will not is the same as won't. And now let's see, I have a new question for you this week, and that is, what is the only continent that is also a country? Whoa, that's interesting. What is the only continent that is also a country? Do you know? All right, well, stay tuned until next time and we'll find out that answer. But now it's time to find out whether or not these Minnie Mouse ears, whether these Minnie Mouse ears are 50 grams or 500 grams in weight or mass. What did you say? 50 or 500 grams? I weighed them just to make sure. Exactly, yes. I hope you said 50 grams because these are still pretty light. They're pretty light. They're not as heavy as a book would be. And well, if I put 50 paper clips in my hand, I would say it would probably be about the same. So great job. That was pretty fun, right? All right, so now since we're done with everything else, I have one last question for you. And that is, how would you use this information about mass in our lives beyond the classroom? How would you use things like grams or kilograms to measure for mass? Can you share an idea with me? Remember, you can always write to me in the comment section on Schoology as a comment, or you can let me know on Zoom. I would love to hear your ideas and how you can incorporate your learning of mass into our world beyond the classroom. But I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm going to tell you one way that you can use this beyond the classroom. I want you to think about something else as well. So, one way that you can use grams and kilograms to measure for mass is by measuring food. So like I told you, I use this scale to help me measure different items. So for example, one of the foods that I need to measure is meat. So for example, if I made chicken, then I would cut it up or leave it whole depending, and I would place it inside of this scale. And then the scale would push down depending on how much I put in there, and it would measure in grams how much that chicken weighs. That's pretty cool, right? Now, and we use a bunch of different things to measure weight. We use pounds, we use ounces, we use a bunch of other things. But grams and kilograms help us measure things within a metric unit. Whereas like the pounds and ounces are our customary units, right? So we're learning something new and how we can apply it. And that could be a hint to you. Who uses metric units in our world to measure things like mass or capacity? Do you know? Feel free to share in our comment section or on Schoology. I would love to hear your ideas. And now until next time, I hope you guys stay well, I hope you stay safe, and I hope you guys are going to have a fantastic rest of your day. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye.